I will get a lot of questions. What is the most favorite sound effect? The rhythm and the feel of the sound design is more important to me than pushing the button or the one perfect sound effect. Well, any sound effect could be interchanged for me, but maybe the placement cannot. But to find that as a sound design to me is far more important than the one sound effect or the one fader or the one this. It is the sum of all of these things in the end that need to work together. Maybe the most important thing I said the whole interview about what I do and why I do it.
Hi, I'm Chad Anderson, one of the hosts of Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify their skill set. You can learn more on filmmakeru.com or follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we are delighted to interview a film and TV professional, and this week, I am most pleased to be joined by sound designer Paul Ottosson, whose work includes Zero Dark 30, The Hurt Locker, and personal favorite of mine, Spider-Man 2. And most recently, we are going to be talking about this riveting new Katherine Bigelow film, A House of Dynamite. Paul, welcome to the show. I'm excited to talk about this film. This one, there was a lot of contention on the ending to this one, which I'm not going to give away. But there were some arguments about it. It was well done. It was an enjoyable time. In terms of doing a film like this, I'm always interested in working with Katherine Bigelow. Was there an overall thematic tone that you were given into the sound design? I'm always fascinated by the idea that there's beyond the politics and beyond the crisis, there is this underlying message of like we want it to feel this way or we want it to look this way or sound this way in your case. Was there a tone that you were like a driving force that you were going for in terms of designing the sound elements of this?
No, for sure. And thanks to Chad for having me here and taking interest in our movie. And I think to your first setup of the ending, I can maybe later on I can speak to a little bit because it is a question that I do get when we do screenings for the movie or friends that see it and stuff. And I end up asking one question that usually changes the mind of the person asking the question. I say, how would you end the movie?
Yeah.
And there really is no ending to this movie. I think you can make you feel good or worse about it, but I think the ending that makes sense the most for the purpose of what Katherine want to do with this movie is the ending that is in the movie. So I won't say more to give
Yeah,
that
I mean, I
away.
think I think it could have gone a thousand different ways, but I think it's an interesting craft idea to let it be open ended, to be open like what it like. Clearly, there is like with the situation in hand, there is no ending that's better than another one, and so let it flow. Yeah, absolutely. But talk to me
Yeah.
about tone.
So tone, yes. So as yeah, not to give away anything, but it's not a happy movie. So there's very little, lighthearted moments in there. So it is it's an I think an overwhelming sense for everybody in the movie and you viewers as well. And I think the sound to add to that impression of you. I mean, the actors show it, it's in the script and so on. But we are stuck in kind of three places for most of the movie. Oh, I shouldn't say stuck. This is where the movie takes place
Sure,
in very specific areas.
we're
So
situated.
yeah, so we kind of locked into that. Uh, Both Catherine and I, we end up saying we like a lot of sounds in the movies, but we're always bound to the reality. I mean, it's something that is not real. It's not in a movie. That's just a part of the deal. So information is of the highest priority in this movie. So I think that this tone, I think, was with convey information coming in, but also people sorting through it, but also taking away some of this information and give you bits and pieces. But I think the tone is we start out like in a regular day. So we don't want to set too much precedence where it's going. The music does set us up, I think, right away out of the gate. It's not going to be a happy movie. But as we get into these rooms, like in the White House, the first room, it's busy. And the conversation changes from just a regular day to you know, nuclear missile coming at us, and we think we have it under control and so on. So the tone changes, I think, in each chapter here. I think that we reset the movie a few times. So I don't as an overall tone in the way, but as a tone that changes within each chapter, I think is very important for the movie.
I got into sound designing at a point when things were just developing. I was really fascinated by the idea that dialogue, effects, and music were all components of the soundtrack to a film, which had never occurred to me before. What gets me excited is coming up with sound ideas that do match picture, but also is not just the equivalent of what you're seeing on screen. I'm Eugene Garrity, and this is my course on sound design.
In terms of the workflow, on a process like this, I always think it's a different conversation for, say, the editor or maybe even the cinematographer. The sound designer, as a creative, you have dialogue, you have sound effects, you have music, and they're coming in. There'll be composers coming in with music, and there'll be the dialogue of the scene. What what is the workflow in terms of that, in terms of the process of working with all these different mediums coming into a situation? Do you start with sound effects? Do you start with, hey, here's dialogue, the dialogue cut, the edit is locked, and then we're going, or are there changes coming along and you're adapting the whole time?
See, for this movie, it's going to be a very different answer than most other movies because the way Katherine works also. And so we know each other for quite a long time now, and we have a good relationship. And so when she sets her mind to do a movie with a script, she gave me the script, I think a few days after she says, I'm going to do this movie. So I'm generally one of the first to read her scripts. And the process starts already there for me. So I read it and I read it again, take notes, and kind of get understanding for what are in these scenes, what I need to record, what I have, but also more important, I think, the tone of it, what the script is telling us. So in her movies, if you look at any movies that I've done with her, like I would say there's more sound effects in this movie than in Spider-Man 2, which is nothing but action on the screen. But here, everything is outside that frame. So when you work on a movie where all the action is on the screen, it is rewarding because you can see it in that way. You can, whatever is on the screen. In the movies, it's a different rewarding. It's what happens outside and what can I add to what's outside this picture. So it doesn't limit you to that. So when I look at the script, I think, how can I influence the viewer? Because in the end of the day, I want to manipulate you. So whatever the script is pointing at, I want to underscore that, maybe enhance it and work with that as a whole. And then also as a sound designer, I also was a mixer on the movie. So that's also workflow for me is a bit different. So when I start in this movie, then again, I start thinking about the process, the script. I have access to a 3-star general that was actually in Stratcom. Wow. He was there, been there for many, many years. So Dan Carville on speed dial for me, hey, Dan, what's in this room? When you're in this room, what do you think? What do you feel? What's the pressure? What is the things you don't want to hear? What is the things you would like to hear? So I can create this huge pile of stuff I can give you and then take away as a viewer. And I think silence become very important in this movie. But silence, I think for silence to be very effective is to build up a huge world before it. So that the silence become more like deafening and that. But Catherine's process is, so when she does the picture edit, she works in a very linear way. So literally she starts on frame 1 and she cuts to the end of the movie. Many other movies, they will go to set pieces. So they will go to emotional piece and they put together this puzzle. They will be like pillars and then they build it together. She works in a very linear way. So when she turns over something, and usually we work in reels, up to around 20 minutes. She will hand it over. I will work on it. This movie worked in chapters because there are 3 chapters. So it was bigger chunks. So there was like 45 minutes for a chapter. So I had to wait a little bit. But I went to the set a few times, see what's going on. But then I get the chapter and I start working with it. When I say it's myself and in a pretty big crew, dialogue editors, Foley editors, sound effects editors, and so on. But I start the mixing process literally day 1 because I know that what she gave me is not going to change it drastically. There's going to be a pass later down the road where there's a little bit of trim here and there. It's not much. I mean, Kurt, back to the picture editor, there's still I think the script is a solid script. He works with the script, but also, I mean, he works on what important pieces are, and then shape everything in between to get a flow and stuff. But then I get the movie after that, and not a lot changes after that point. So that allows me to work towards that mix. And sorry for rambling on, but it's a
No,
very
no.
different on the movie. So I pre-dub a final mix from day one. So when
Wow.
I get then fast forward into the future, when I get to pre-dubbing, I actually spend time almost like final mixing at that point. So my pre-dub time is my own final mix. And then when I get to do the final mix with a new score and so on, that is literally only to mix in that music. So we have ample time to do a proper mix in the end of it. So, I work with sound effects, dialogue, etc. The music, we do add in temp music, and I work against that. And the temp music in this movie was from Volker, and he was also the composer of the movie. So I got to understand a little bit how he works. Of course, every movie he scores is a different movie,
Sure.
but I think that there's something individualized by. Like if I hear there's a lot of composers I can identify, and I think it's a good thing. There's a personality to it. So I started working against Volker's music, and then I send him what I've worked on, and then he
Yeah.
works against what I've worked on. So we have this relationship. We go back and forth. So we start out this wide, then we hone in, we hone in, hone in, hone in. Eventually, we have the movie at the end. So in a long drawn out way, that's kind of the broader way of the workflow.
I have never done sound effects on this capacity, but I've worked in some commercial work. To create an environment, to create a kind of an ambient environment of there, especially in this situation of the Stratcom room. My first thought is I always have a habit of doing too much. Too many sounds, every single bird, every single walkie-talkie, every single footstep, every single heartbeat, throw it all in there, and then someone will come and yell at me and say it's too much, and then I'll start pulling back and pulling back and pulling back.
Yeah, yeah.
When you mentioned before that you like a lot of sound, do you have a thought in your mind of when you know that I've done overkill on the amount of sounds in here and it's drowning this out? Or how do you balance doing
Yeah.
too much, I guess?
I think it's a really good, interesting question because I think when I started out, and I don't mean it's any other way, but it was a learning process for me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started working on some bigger movies, I worked for someone else. There was a supervisor or a mixer or something else. And I said, well, if I give them this, they have all the options.
Yeah,
Once I started to mix, I really only cut what I'm gonna have for the mix. So if you go and look at my mix sessions, there's nothing muted pretty much. It is just I cut what I wanted and that's it. Of course, I work with other sound effects editors and we have a great relationship, but there's still, I think, when you work as an editor, you give a little bit more. So if I get something back from my sound effects editor, I look at there might be things that I mute out and it's too much. But when I know, I think it's just a gut feeling, and that's some questions are hard to answer making movies because I don't know if I do it the right way or the wrong way. But this is the only way I know. In,
sure.
in, in a way, of course, you take direction from director and you interpret what they like and what they want. But when I do it on my own, I have my way of doing it. Katherine and we align, I think, really well. I think she understands what I can bring to the movie, and I know what she wants. And so we have this parameters that we work in. But at the end of the day, it is a gut feeling. I sit and work with it, and sometimes I want to be overwhelmed by it. And yeah, overwhelming, I think, has a bigger bandwidth of how much I can put in there versus I need to create this intimate space. And I think in those spaces becomes very, very fragile. And one sound effect too many makes it, to me, fall apart. So there's
Sure.
scenes in the movie where there's a younger boy calling his mom that lives in Chicago, where I don't give away too much of the movie if you haven't seen it. And there's almost nothing in the scene. When we get to the president in a helicopter in the end, it's almost nothing in the scene as well. But there's other scenes prior where I have like just 500 tracks of things. But yeah, but it's a different demands of each scene as well.
So in terms of that, one of the things that struck me by this idea of this film is it's this crisis situation, and the crisis is overwhelming. But in the storyline, I want to believe that the people who are in that room, the generals and the security personnel, are, they're really, they have planned for this their whole lives. And so I think in terms of my feeling about many of the scenes, there was this what I would consider like a subdued sense of panic. You can tell people are freaked out, but they're trying to be professional in a
Yeah, yeah,
sense that they're not trying to be freaked out. And so I was thinking about the sound in terms of that atmosphere of, someone's making a phone call when they shouldn't be, or someone is trying to get, this feeling of like, you know, tapping their foot aggressively, or those sounds of like, hey, we're everyone's fine, everything's okay, and they keep trying to reiterate this idea that everything's fine, nothing to worry about, it's all going to work out, it's all going to be fine, don't
mm,
freak out. And you can tell that everyone in the scene, and I think that makes it scarier, is that
yeah.
you're like, no, just freak out so I can start freaking out. And they don't, and they try to keep their composure there. And I think part of the sound elements is just like there are people who are working there who you imagine are going about their business, doing their job as they've been trained to, but slipping a little because
Yeah.
impending doom.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
think it's a really interesting question that you have because working on a movie, speaking with this three-star general, we got to learn what this process is. And they rehearse this 400 times in a year. So today, when I walk in the day, it is the plumber coming to your house fixing a leaky toilet. You've done it 1,000 times. It's really not a big deal.
yeah,
And that's how each day starts out there for, I think, in all these set pieces. When that's one guy said, well, we don't need that guy. We'll start, this is going to be over in 5 minutes. I mean, that's a mindset of it because they rehearse 400 times in a year.
yeah,
Of course, there's a switch in it. And that was something that I worked quite a bit on. So we shot group and in how versed your audience is, but the Waller group, all the people in the background.
yeah. Loop
So we
groups,
had
yeah,
we have like 15 of them. So it's a pretty large group because we had a lot of people on the screen. And usually we do loose scripting what the scene is about. We recorded a full day of it. And I took it back and started working with it. And it's like, it just didn't work, that change. It didn't feel organic to it. So then
yeah,
uh, I started thinking about it. So then I went back to the writer, Noah, then they wrote the script. And I said, Noah, I have a crazy idea. Can you write me a script basically for the Waller group? So we went back to shot another 2 days. So we had an imaginary call on the other end that was scripted, and then the other person answering to it. So versus just answering the phone saying, "Hey, Stratcom" or Greeley, they responded more in the proper way. But that's they on a piece of paper they had what they were responding to. So so there was a gradual panic in the script that we had. So we shot these longer scenes. Of course, we puzzled this together over then. But to get that shift from it's just a regular day, we're rehearsing this, to we go into DEFCON 2 and 1, and it's going down
yeah,
the tube. And there's two moments in the movie just from the group that just I love these small silly things. There's one girl in loop roost who ripped off like a four-letter word in the middle of it that we use in the end, and it really signifies that we're outside the boundaries of what been rehearsed. And there's another girl that says 3 times in the movie says like Christ, that Jesus Christ, and she start crying when we go to DEFCON 1. And you can hear that faintly in all
yeah.
chapters of it. And I loved it because I know that we've gone beyond what has been rehearsed for, and we've gone to a different space now. But that was something that's very important for the movie to work, and I think it's all succeeded on all level, written, acted, and what we all did with the sound.
Yeah, that's so interesting because like it is like the whispered Christ, or like some little
Yeah,
snippet of profanity, which means
yeah, yeah,
like the hard exterior of these professional people is breaking just enough that
yeah,
like they're like, this isn't a game anymore, this isn't a
yeah,
rehearsal anymore, this is this is the real thing. And it's just, it sneaks in there and you're like, this is not good. Like,
Yeah,
because, this assistant just said Christ and now we're in a different environment now. Like all
yeah,
of a sudden people wake up and go, this is real. Um,
yeah.
in terms of that, working with Noah, as you mentioned, but also working with Katherine Bigelow, you've worked with Katherine Bigelow with Zero Dark 30 and The Hurt Locker, and you mentioned now that you developed sort of a relationship that there's a confidence there. Are there moments? I'm always interested in the idea of kind of freedom from the editor or the cinematographer or the sound designer to say, hey, this isn't working, we need to go this direction. And there's obviously a camaraderie there, but there's also a kind of a negotiation in, hey, can we do this instead? Were there moments in this where you said, hey, we need to pull this back, or we need to be more aggressive on this, or that there's a debate happening between creators of the show and you saying, I think this would sound better if we did it this way.
Yeah, no, it's a very creative process with Catherine on the whole crew. It's all on all levels, speaking to, like, if I go to the set and Catherine, what do you think? And she really listens to, not that she embraces and take every day as I change her what she want to do, but she's very willing to listen to all of these things. And I think that's a strength of her, that she trusts the people that she hires, because
Sure.
you specialize in something that's very good. I think it's one of her superpowers, hiring the right people to do all of this stuff. But there's certainly moments in the movie. But they don't become arguments. They become a good, valid discussion. And every time something comes up, working with Catherine, if I have a good enough of a reason, 99% of the times it will fly.
Hmm.
And the reason, if reason doesn't fly, then because we're based on reality, so it's not we based on this decision if this will be real or not. And one instance is, I spoke about information earlier, so this is the currency of the movie is information, and I wanted to take away some of the information. So there's at times like in the first chapter, the second chapter, there's dialogue that you really should hear for the purpose of the clarity of the story. But I said, how about if we fudge this up? How about if I play this lower? How about if I lay another group line on top of it, so I don't hear the very important line? We can hear it in chapter 2 instead, or in chapter 3. So I played the first chapter down for Catherine and Kirk, then the picture editor, and said, hey, there's going to be a few things here, it can be a few surprises, let's discuss them. And of course, one of them was, I couldn't hear the dialogue there, but we didn't stop. We just kind of kept playing, and then it's okay. Why? And I said, well, this is what I thought. And I said, I really love it because it makes it more fragile. And
Sure.
and it is a fragile system because it is not a perfect system. We imagine it's a perfect system. Sure, someone shoots a nuclear missile at us. We have 10 ways to deal with this. We really have no way. We have one tiny way, and it's such a fragile. So I wanted to play with that. So that's something that became a discussion. And then we watched it, and I said, yeah, really like this. It was never planned to be like that.
Yeah.
But there's this openness working with Catherine that makes it really enjoyable, because I think everybody who works with her will say the same thing. You do your best work with her because you put so much of yourself into it, and there's such great appreciation for you doing it.
That's great. Yeah, it's great that you have that. You can take that initiative and say, "I want this," and then it's rewarded, not punished.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. That's kind of
yeah.
what it
Yeah,
should be.
yeah, and I think as a human being, I think no matter what you do in life, I think it's something that makes you feel really good about yourself, and you feel really good about what you're doing, and you put more effort into it. No matter what it is, if you work in a restaurant, you work in industry, whatever you do, if you get that feedback from your dear, I think it's really important. I think so. And Catherine's just really good at.
Yeah, it's crazy. I had a boss. I worked at a grocery store when I was a kid, and I had a boss who said, work for somebody who rewards initiative and encourages creativity. And
Yeah,
that was his
absolutely.
message.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
always remembered reward initiative. Like, yeah, someone takes initiative, tries something, that's the
yeah,
ideal place to work. Um,
yeah.
I
No,
have a
no,
I
no,
have a strange question, and I don't know if it's from a place where you can answer it or it's from a writing place. Um, it was interesting as an idea that Idris Elba is not in the film for the first two chapters. His
Hmm.
voice is, but he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I heard that and I was like, I know that voice.
Yeah.
And it took me like maybe to the second chapter, and I said, okay, wait a minute. And I was with a friend of mine. We were watching this, and I said, I think this is Idris Elba. I think this is Idris Elba.
Hmm.
And it wasn't. It was deliberately avoided as though it was just this kind of theoretical voice of this overwhelmed president who was now having to deal with this. And I think it's a different idea because you know who Idris Elba is and you know what Idris Elba brings to the scene, but now there's just this voice on the other end of this line who you
Hmm.
can't see what he's going through, but you're hearing what he's going through. Um, how did that idea come about? And was there something that you did in terms of that to create this kind of tension in there? And how has that worked with?
It ties into the previous question. If there's anything that I did change, we talked about sound and so on. So Idris was one of them because I know we're going to hear a bit of him in the second chapter, and then we're going to see basically all of these things play out in the third chapter. So if we were to go back and look at it again, it is hard to hear, but it's all intentionally. So he's futzed up. I use a lot of the lav mics on the rustle and the
Yeah,
fabric
yeah,
becomes really noisy. So and that's even points in when he reads out from the cookie he has to read out the clearance to the launch codes and all of that stuff, that I play group lines louder than that. I play him first in cut ups because I thought it's interesting not to give away. Well, we knew there was someone of great authority, but I think it's harder to identify maybe Idris. So we know the president, of course, but I think it was great to take the most important person and the most important information. I mean, we all have answers. He had a question to take away.
yeah,
I mean, we all had questions, and he had an answer, but to take away some of those answers for us, to keep us, it's like I watched the movie a few times with the audience, and like I love it each time. It's like it's such an important line. Actually, I don't hear it quite well enough. So,
yeah.
but that was something when I played the first chapter, we liked and then kind of embraced. And we took other liberties with taking out lines and to make it a little bit more, not confusing, but you wanting to hear more.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because I think, as a bigger issue, and Idris is part of that, but it's the idea that you're telling these three chapters from different locations and from different scenario perspectives, and you're getting glimpses of them, like little snippets of them over the phone, hearing somebody saying, oh, what is she talking about? Like, and you hear just a snippet of that. And then we go to the next scene and you're like, oh, there's also a crisis happening here
Yeah, yeah,
in a
yeah,
separate location, and it's very playful, or you get to see kind of these different realities. It's almost like three films in one, in that you're
yeah.
seeing these different realities of these different perspectives that were, you don't know what's happening in the room, and then you get to find out what's happening in the room, and that maybe is more dramatic than what's happening in this room, or now you have a whole new set of feelings and a whole
Yeah.
new set of cares.
It's like escalation building. I think that's escalation building in each room, and then each chapter we go to, the resets, but the escalation already started higher up. And then I think when you talk sonically, we get to the present, the ultimate escalate, because now the decision, but
Yeah,
then peel away almost all, and it becomes very human story. It's like the first two chapters about very gathering information, very structured, procedural, to get to now the most human part of it, the one guy. And literally, he could be you or he could be anyone. And I don't
yeah,
think anyone is suited to be posed that question and expected to give a reasonable answer in that amount of time. It's incredible setup. It's real world scenario. But I loved that the most important part in it is just this vulnerable human being, and he calls his wife, and
yeah.
he does these things, and the story, I think it just is such beautiful because the question is such an overwhelming question that I don't think we have capability of really answering it. And I think that's why the ending also works great because I think you get the ticket and you go and see this movie, you become the president in a way. I think. I mean, what the hell do you do? I mean, am I capable of making that decision, or would be better set up to never have to make the decision? You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt to me, like, you see, not to discredit them, but you see these kind of two-dimensional action movies where the hero always has the right answer and is always the bravest person in the room and is always, gonna act, aggressively and bravely and do those things. And this is like, no, this is not real. Real
Yeah.
is like, I'm gonna, vote to end the world
Yeah.
and give
And then
me a second. I'm a human being and
yeah.
not like I don't care who you are. We're dealing with real world things, and now it's a different conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
I think we can discredit some of these two-dimensional movies in a way because I think they make us numb to the reality of some questions do not have a good enough of an answer that's going to satisfy you, but it's still the answer.
yeah,
Sometimes it's a question that we do not have an answer for. And I think sometimes they have to satisfy you in a way. Well, maybe I need to say, why do I have this question? I think it sets the whole situation up differently. So instead of having an answer, we need to change the way so the question never comes up because I will never
absolutely.
have an appropriate answer. And I think a lot of movies, unfortunately, will satisfy you in the hour and a half or 2 hours. They give you everything there is. And in this movie, you can't give the viewer a villain because then the purpose of the movie is gone. Okay, then we're just going to focus on the
Yeah,
villain. And if we give you a good answer, then we have no problem. So I think the movie can really only end the way it ends. So it has to serve a real purpose, not to be another, one in a million movie where we sort out everything in the end and
yeah,
skip away to the sunset and so I think life is I saw a discussion I have my son sometimes too. He's looking for the right answer. I said, same thing. Sometimes there isn't the answer that's going to make you happy, but it's the only answer or the best answer that's there. And,
yeah, yeah.
and
I
that's
think,
how it is.
yeah, with my children, the same thing. I mean, a lot of times they say, that we see these movies that are kind of open ended like this, and I say, well, what would happen? This is not cut and dry. It's not the hero rides off from the sunset and victory and etc. Like, yeah, there's some things.
Yeah,
There's the chapter two is the idea of hitting a bullet with a bullet. I think that's chapter
yeah,
two.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, and there's are the questions that come out of this of like, no, have we been just asleep at the wheel
yeah.
thinking that someone else is
Exactly.
taking care of this and that we're prepared? um it's
No, no,
terrifying.
I think we accept that. I don't accept that we kind of forgot about this. I think we've been
Yeah,
busy with all these other things in the news and this and that. And I'm thinking, there's a lot of important things we're discussing in news and people get up in arms about. But if this one scenario happens, none of anything else we speak about right now matters at all. All of those other busy things will be sorted out with one nuclear explosion. We're all
sure.
back to an equal level where real important things can be sorted out in about a minute. And I think watching the movie, it changed me a little bit. Like Jaws changed me. I couldn't get into an ocean for the longest time. I couldn't even get into lakes. I would think about Jaws. It was with me. This movie now, I think about as we're having this discussion here, that scenario could be playing out and we wouldn't know about it.
Sure.
And I think so it's changed me and I'm not as comfortable as I was prior to reading this damn script. It was like I'm living this little world, sure we can take it down, and even I mean the percentages you give you in the movie are actually not even real in the way. Those are best case on the test scenario. The real world scenario, as I'm reading all this paper on it, is even lower. It's not 61%. I think it's like 44 to 51% to hit the bullet with a bullet in a real world scenario. And who knows if it's even that. I mean, you have something traveling at you that speed, you try to hit it with something else that flies even faster. And these are not huge
Yeah.
objects. It's not like a building flying towards a building. These are small objects relatively in that speed.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely.
it's a crazy that scenario. You're sitting working with this, you're like, holy cow, I had no idea. So most movies you work with, you learn a little bit. This one is just like it changed your life a little bit.
I like to believe that in case of, God forbid, a nuclear attack, that Spider-Man 2 will come to save us and take care of everything and fix everything, which is,
Yeah,
the best
yeah,
Spider-Man.
yeah.
Um, I have one final question for you, Paul. If you weren't doing this, if you weren't doing sound design, which you're extremely good at, but if you weren't doing this, would there be some other version, alternate universe of Paul Ottosson who would be doing something else in his career as a person?
Is this a 10-second answer or the 2 minute answer? Or do you,
Do whichever. Sure, go for the
I'm
2 minutes.
close with both. I started out way back in Sweden. I wanted to be a rock star. That's really the only thing I ever wanted to be. Not a great musician. I played a lot of different instruments, but I want to be a rock star. So that might
Absolutely.
be the thing that I had as a dream. Growing up now, I'm really glad I didn't become a rock star. I don't think that would be my really cup of tea. But I feel super blessed doing what I'm doing. But I slid into this through music, and the music's always been very close to me. So now, in between movies right now, I'm working on writing songs again. Uh, what I like in the real world, for a moment when I played with my band, they left. I worked as a Finnish carpenter over here in the United States. I was good with math, and the guy I worked on very high-end project angles and stuff with wood and so on. And it was very, very satisfying. Because when I worked on something that's like tactile in your hands, I love that. And when I was done, I can stand back and look at it, and it's something that's beautiful. Yes, that we worked on. And everybody's really happy. The movies was very hard. It's a movie is like a million compromises, and you run out
Mhm.
of time to fix all the compromises. At the end of the day, I think you do the best that you can with the time that you have. So in this dream job of mine, it might be something that would be in any field that when I'm done, it is done. And I can feel its completeness. Working with movies and music, it is never done. It's never perfect. And my perspective will change on it. When I watch Zero Dark 30 now, or Hurt Locker, we were awarded these movies with Oscars, and we loved them. I loved them, so on. I look at them, there's still things that maybe I could have done that. It never
Yep.
ends. So, but I'm blessed to do what I do. I work with great people. I work with a great crew. My assistant Ryan been with me for like over 20 years now, and you know, blessed what I'm doing. So maybe I
Well,
shouldn't just be happy with this.
I think it says something about an artist that they are kind of, it's not perfection. And maybe it shouldn't be perfection. It should be progress. It should be I can see this better and I can see these ideas and I can continue and I can still feel a creative energy to work to craft this. Yeah, but now I'm
Yeah,
picturing I'm picturing Paul with a guitar and a headband and
yeah.
some
No, I had hair down to my waist back in those
yeah,
days.
yeah.
But in his movies, I mean, I think also your perspective changes as you
Sure.
grow in your work and stuff. So when I look even at this movie right now, and I'm going to say what it is, but that's one sound that bothers me, how I played it. That there's one sound in it, and I know maybe in 20 years there'll be more of it. I just look at the things differently, and I think that's a creative part of this beautiful and wonderful that grow within it. But also it's the part that it's just never done. I mean, most directors I work with, you're watching the movie again, I can't stand watching it. They just don't watch it again. And it's such a shame because such a beautiful, great project that spends so much time in the lives of all of us. And you look at it and you're like, you can't look at it in the way that an audience member can look at it ever. They sit down and they
Yeah.
love it. Oh, it's perfect. What a great movie. And it's a movie make. You look at it and you're like, you remember doing this, you remember doing that, and blah, blah, blah. You see all the decisions and so on in it. So, but anyways, maybe too much long of an answer, but
No, no, it's great. It's fantastic. Paul, it's been a really interesting time. I'm really fascinated by your background and some of the ideas you have. And now I've been re-terrified of nuclear disaster because I'm thinking about this movie again. But it was extremely well done, and your work in it
Thank
was
you.
extremely well done as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah,
And I
thank you,
want to say
Chad, for
thank you to
having me here. Thank you for having me
absolutely.
here. Lovely being born, and hopefully we didn't go too philosophical with it.
No,
But thank
I love the philosophical aspect of it. There's a lot of it that can be a little bit of button pushing, and raising faders and doing those kind of things, and that's exciting to me too. But like talking about the ideas behind it, is really where the creativity for me really speaks to a higher kind of level of production. Um,
Can I add something to that then?
yes,
I know we already had a question wrapping up the interview, but I because I spoke with Walter Murch, I've become a friend over some time,
sure.
and so I've tried this as a sound designer for the longest time, and I would get a lot of questions in interviews like this. What is the most favorite sound effect? What is the hardest one sounding in the movie?
Yeah,
And I never looked at it like that as a sound designer. I think to me, speaking is more on the what you just brought up, uh, the rhythm and the feel of the sound design is more important to me than pushing the button or the one perfect sound effect. Well, I wouldn't say perfect; they're perfect sound effects, but in a movie like this, we can't have this really cool sound effect. It can't draw you. It can't be cooler than the movie.
yeah,
It has to support the story. And I think Catherine's move is very, very important that we stay in this realistic place. So there's times like you could put in like a whoosh. We can't do it. We can pre-lap maybe with real sound in it, but we can't do that in this movie. It doesn't work within the sound design of this movie. So when I look at the sound design and the title of the sound designer, it's the shape of all of these things to find the rhythm. And I look at it orchestrating a piece of musical orchestra. You have the piccolo flute, you have the low big toms to fill in those spaces when you need to and write
yeah,
it like a piece of music. And a lot of times it's not just any sound effect could be interchanged for me pretty much here with something else, but maybe the placement cannot. And maybe the tone of it, but there's a range within it. But to find that as a sound design to me is far more important than the one sound effect or the one fader or the one this. It is the sum of all of these things in the end that need to work together. And
yeah.
one thing can't outshine the other 50 things that it is or the movie itself. So I think that's maybe the most important thing I said the whole interview about what I do and why I do it.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. He gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career. Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now.
Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
Yeah, well, if you can be talking about Walter Murch, I will bring up the story that I heard of Walter Murch when making Apocalypse Now. Was that the helicopter blades in the beginning? I don't know if you heard this story, weren't actual real helicopter blades because Walter Murch had determined that the sound of real helicopter blades would be too real, and so he wanted a synthesizer to
Mhm.
replicate helicopter blades because he wanted the audience to wonder whether the helicopter blades were real or were just in Martin Sheen's head and he was
Yeah,
just
yeah,
imagining them. So too real of helicopter blades would have psychologically convinced the audience that it was too,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so, there was a psychology behind the sound effect, which I just thought was
yeah,
more
yeah.
thought than I've ever put into a sound effect before of how the sound effect makes you feel in terms of the realism.
No, for sure. I got to get on a call with him in about an hour and 13 minutes. Maybe I'll ask him, Walter, about it. But when I started sound design, there's something I found very interesting. So I started mixing commercials, this composer first, and I did an NBA commercial, and there was a big basketball on the end of it. And he said, "Hey,
Yeah.
can you put in a big basketball?" And I just learned a little bit of editing. We had like Pro Tools,
Yeah.
or a sound designer actually before Pro Tools. And I put in a basketball, and it's like, "Hey, make it bigger." So I compressed it low and bigger, bigger. I just couldn't get it big enough. And he said, "Do you have like a cannon blast?" And I was like, I remember sitting in the chair, turning, I was like, "Cannon? But it's a basketball. Why would it be a cannon? It doesn't make any sense. You put in a cannon, the producer, it's going to work." So I cut in the cannon, I lined it up, punched it into my 24 track, went back and then mixed the music, put in the cannon. He's like, "That's it," he said. And I was like, I could use a cannon as a basketball. And there's a whole thing that opened up in my head, that I understood the sound design gave me this freedom of using something that wasn't what it was. Like in Fury, a movie I worked on, insane amount of sound, takes place World War II. And we wanted to have this big cannon from the Tiger tank projectile flying in.
Gotcha.
And I read up as much as I could. We recorded this Tiger tank. There was one existing in Germany, but there was really nothing, a recording of the Tiger tank firing it. But it's super high velocity. I went and listened to recordings, blah, blah, blah. And then in my head, I say, my son had his toy that a whistle in it. There's a football. And it reminded me a little bit of that. So I recorded this toy that put whistles on it and threw it, and it started whistling through the air. So if you go back to watch Fury now, when they fire these missiles, this is an instant little toy, a foam toy with whistles typed around it. But in the movie, it is terrifying. And that's how they described it when I read up this historical events, when they fired, how terrifying this screaming sound was of this coming in. In the movie, it's a toy whistle flying by you. But in the movie, it works.
That's great.
Yeah. So
yeah. You never know what sound's going to work. It's amazing.
That's right.
This has been fascinating, and you're gonna have me talking for another 2 hours and you're gonna miss your phone call. But no, Paul, thank you so much again. Good luck. I'm excited to see what you're gonna do next, and hopefully what you and Katherine are gonna do next. This film is fantastic. I was overwhelmed by it, and it kept me up at night. But amazing work. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and talk to us today. I really appreciate it. That's going to be it for me for Filmmaker U. Again, you can follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u, or catch us on our website at filmmakeru.com. My name is Chad Anderson. I was here with Paul Ottosson talking about this film, House of Dynamite, and we'll see you in a future episode.